Anytime someone plans on visiting Guatemala, chances are it's because they're drawn to its volcanoes. And I mean, rightfully so. The country is riddled with volcanoes, some of which are active and offer tourists the incredible chance to see lava up close. It's a natural wonder that's pretty hard to put into words once you experience it.
Oh, holy crap!
But what if I told you there's a part of Guatemala that provides a far different and a more enriching experience? Beyond Guatemala's volcanoes and its bright, bustling cities lies a region that feels deeply authentic and far off the typical tourist path. It's a part of Guatemala that reflects the true spirit of Maya tradition, the country's turbulent history, and the resilience of its people. This is the Guatemalan Highlands. Eager to learn about Guatemala's history and rural lifestyle, I reached out to Quetzaltrekkers, a local trekking company. Quetzaltrekkers stood out to me because they offer sustainable and educational treks through the highlands and are a volunteer-led organization dedicated to supporting disadvantaged children in their community. Their hikes fund EDELAC, a nonprofit social project that operates a primary school and a safe home for children. 100% of the profits from each Quetzaltrekkers hike goes directly to supporting the communities they hike through and the children in EDELAC. It's truly incredible. With the hike locked in, we started reaching out to friends who'd like to join us on this journey. Our group consisted of 7 people. Myself, my partner Marcelo, Janine, my best friend from university, Marcelo's friend Blake, who he met while hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, our Quetzaltrekker guides, Yara from the Netherlands.
Anybody want some sunscreen? No.
Brian from the US, and their guide in training, Marcos, who hails from a small town in Guatemala. Over the next few days, we would hike from village to village, some of which are only accessible by foot, until we reached our final destination, Todos Santos. Our journey began in Nebaj, a Maya town nestled in the heart of the Ixil community in the Western Highlands. When we arrived, the town was gearing up for their annual Easter celebrations. Music, prayer, Good Friday reenactments. The square was filled with vibrancy and life. But Nebaj was more than just a vibrant town. It was the first of many reminders of Guatemala's dark past and a reflection of the indigenous people's resilience. Located in what was once termed the Ixil Triangle, Nebaj, along with the other towns we'd be hiking through, bore the brunt of the country's widespread violence. Guatemala's colonization by Spanish conquistadors in the early 16th century led to centuries of indigenous oppression and social inequality. The Guatemalan armed conflict in the 1960s to the 1990s emerged from issues like land disparities, ethnic discrimination, and demands for social justice, resulting in over 200,000 deaths or disappearances.
The emergency announcement that 5,000 Indians in a Guatemalan village were about to be murdered by government troops. Leftist guerrillas fighting a rightist-oriented army for control of the country, with innocent civilians caught in the middle, with U.S. officials...
It was later stated in the UN Truth Commission that over 80% of these deaths were indigenous peoples. The Ixil region was a focal point for guerrilla activity, due to its rugged terrain and the social and economic marginalization of its indigenous peoples, making them prime recruits. Government forces targeted suspected guerrilla sympathizers, leading to widespread violence and the destruction of entire villages. Our journey through these communities was more than just a trek. It was a profound exploration of history, witnessing the resilience and enduring spirit of the Guatemalan people. For some of us, taking on this trek was the first big hike of the season. For others, it was their first big hike ever.
You look like a legit hiker.
Thank you. I'm not at all.
I think you are. You're hiking, that makes you a hiker.
Does it make me a hiker?
Some of us were meeting for the first time, and some of us had known each other for years. Though we all came from different places around the world and had different reasons for tackling this trek, we were collectively bonded by our goal of making it to Todos Santos.
We're very early.
Yeah.
So that is
Because we're
great.
so fast.
That means that we've got some time to explore Acul, but also to relax, drink loads of water, cool down a little bit, change that sweaty shirt you're wearing, or at least I will do that. And then, yeah.
So like in terms of like what you thought it was going to be harder?
Yeah, like going up,
Yeah.
I genuinely thought
Was it like lungs or like legs?
I would say like lungs probably. Like the panting. I was panting a lot. You're obsessed with me. That's so kind. We just met. Oh, okay. Now he's biting.
We stayed at Hostal y Comedor Magdalena and were hosted by Magdalena herself. The wrinkles on her face, just like rings on a tree, reflected a lifetime of stories. Though she was quiet and kept to herself, she made sure we felt right at home. Whether that be keeping our tortilla basket stocked with fresh tortillas at all times, or keeping the common areas clean. It was a joy to be hosted by her. Acul is a small, quiet town, and its charm was hard to miss. The colorful buildings were just as bright as the local flora, and the warmth of its people felt just as inviting as the warm afternoon sun. Though it was hard to believe that this quiet, small town had experienced such intense adversity just 40 years earlier.
Especially during the armed conflict that happened over 36 years, the second half of the 20th century. This was a place that was heavily affected by the armed conflict. Why? Because of this remote.
In 1980 and 1981, Acul became a battleground, caught between guerrilla forces and government troops. Suspected of harboring sympathizers for the opposing side, the town endured violence and fear, culminating in the devastating Acul Massacre, which claimed the lives of 172 individuals.
There was one particular event here that was really notable, where the army came into the town and they gathered all of the men at the church in town, and they beat them, they kicked them, they put them on the ground and covered them with all kinds of dirt, leaves, things like that, and then made others in the village come as well and walk over them. Basically psychological abuse, also killings. A lot of them were shot.
Following the massacre, survivors fled into the mountains, living under the shadow of guerrilla control and and facing relentless attacks from the military for nearly 2 years. When they eventually returned to their village, they found it in ruins. The aftermath of the conflict brought further upheaval as the army imposed reconstruction efforts on Acul. Forced land redistribution and the creation of model villages led to the erosion of traditional Mayan communities, with families torn apart and ancestral lands lost. But despite Acul's tragic past, Magdalena assured us that Acul's residents remain resilient and maintain a sense of contentment.
I almost bought like
That's true.
2 red and 1 green for everybody instead of 3, because I like the green ones. And I was like, oh, then I can trade people. I said like, do you want
3 greens?
Exactly, and I didn't do it in the end because it was my tactic to get more greens, give everybody all the greens.
We departed Acul in the early morning and immediately began our major ascent of the day. Unlike the end of the rainy season, when fields are green and lush, the landscape was extremely dry. Central America faces a range of climate issues, from extreme droughts to cyclones, depending on the season. Many of the areas we were hiking through fell within the Central American dry corridor, known for its seasonal precipitation patterns, vulnerability to climate change, poverty, and food insecurity. Despite many towns rationing their water supplies to families during the dry season, it was abundantly clear that everything was dry and scorched. The locals farmed to the best of their abilities under these harsh conditions, holding on to the promise of the rainy season. Making it to the altiplano felt like a particular mile marker in our trek. It signaled the end of our day's ascent, and it gave way to a drastically different landscape. It also made for the perfect lunch spot. This was worth the climb.
Yeah, are we even gonna be able to eat this entire thing?
No.
Okay.
You know what? I actually did enjoy the harmonica. I'm happy you brought that because it's really good at it.
The landscape was incredibly captivating. It was as though rocks and boulders had fallen from the sky and scattered across the ground we were walking upon. Thankfully, our knowledgeable guides were able to explain this natural spectacle.
How were they formed? Well, actually, marine fossils pressed together formed the rocks we see right
Guatemala
now.
geographically,
Why
there's
marine
like
fossils?
3
Tectonic
at least the
plates
rocks
that
that
we see right now, they have been formed in the Cretaceous
only
time period,
or even a
scratching
little
each
bit
other, but also at the same time moving
get
get together. So that is kind of at the north of Guatemala, close to
So
Tajumulco.
the rock
we
Tacanados
can
are
see
the
right
most
now is
north-
called limestone. That's a very fragile rock.
Rocks are
very
cool, okay?
Erosive.
Despite our apparent exhaustion and seemingly uninterested body language, we were all rather interested in learning about Guatemala's unique landscape. As we made our way through a vast open field, we walked past several sinkholes and piles of rocks arranged into squares. The squares, we learned, were remnants of old military huts from the 1980s when the area served as a military camp. As we carried on, we came upon a cemetery with a somber history. During the armed conflict, the army carried out another massacre in a nearby village and buried the victims in a mass grave in that very field. Years later, survivors returned to the mass grave to honor the memory of the victims, transforming the site into a cemetery. We carried on with the weight of Guatemala's dark history lingering in the air, prompting us to reflect deeply on our journey thus far. With 2 days under our belt and 2 days to go, our team felt deeply connected. Bonds form much faster when you spend time together on trail. Personally, I think they form even faster when you collectively experience a trek like this one. There's a lot of dark history and sorrow to take in throughout the day, but getting to learn and reflect as a group helped us create an even deeper connection to each other, the land, and the people we met along the way. I remember sitting around the fire, feeling thankful for Quetzaltrekkers. Completing this trek without their support would not have been possible. Thanks to Quetzaltrekkers and their deep connections with the communities, we were able to sit with locals, hear their stories, walk through history, and be graciously welcomed into this part of Guatemala. The morning brought us through a landscape unlike anything we had seen yet. The sharp bushes scratched at our calves as we navigated the tight, dusty path, surrounded by rocks and forest on either side of the shrubby plain. The air was still and complemented by the sound of birds singing in the distance. Though the open plain was beautiful during the cool hours of the morning, the mid-morning sun had made its appearance and had no intention of giving us a break. Yara and Brian kept our spirits up as they teased us with the potential opportunity to swim in a river during our upcoming lunch break.
Yeah.
Let's go!
Truthfully, the thought of jumping into a cold river had me feeling giddy. I was on a mission to get to that river. All we had to do was press on a little further, descend into the valley, and apparently this happens every year. What's normally a gushing river teeming with life was completely dried up. Just a ghostly version of its former self, and a reminder of the harsh realities of life in the Highlands. Regardless, it made for another great lunch spot.
Goodbye.
I was a clean bite. I was hoping that the style would just crumble.
Oh yeah, like that. Karma.
In Ventosa, we were welcomed into Don Heronimo's family home. Don Heronimo and his family were incredibly welcoming, which seemed to be a trend in terms of Guatemalan hospitality. But beyond hosting us for the night, Don Heronimo wanted to play a bigger role in our understanding of the Guatemalan armed conflict through sharing his personal story. Don Heronimo recounted an event from 1982 when guerrilla contacts visited his village, offering promises of economic reform and equity. The sincerity of their words persuaded villagers to offer their support, symbolized by the list of names willingly provided. However, on March 12, soldiers, armed with the list of alleged guerrilla supporters, descended upon Ventosa. They killed and brutally tortured alleged supporters, including Don Heronimo's uncle. Amidst the chaos, the ascent of General Rios Montt to presidency momentarily eased tensions.
Por favor, señores de la subversión, tomen nota de lo siguiente. Solo el ejército de Guatemala debe tener las armas. Ustedes dejen las armas, porque si no dejan las armas, nosotros les vamos a quitar las armas. Y oigan más, Oigan bien, señores. No aparecerán más asesinados en las orillas de las carreteras. Se irá a fusilar a quien esté en contra de la ley.
Yet violence soon resurged as guerrillas sought retribution.
We traveled through 3 provinces and saw whole valleys empty of humanity with crops abandoned.
In 1995, the UN peace talks began, and Don Heronimo was hired as a radio tower guard. While at the tower on December 29, 1996, Don Heronimo heard the signing of the peace accord over the radio and cried with joy. This agreement aimed to recognize indigenous rights and reduce military dominance, promoting a democratic and inclusive society. Though the peace accord signaled the way forward, corruption continues to persist and promises have been left unmade. Don Heronimo left us with a few parting words. He first thanked God for his family's health and happiness, then expressed gratitude for Quetzaltrekkers and our interest in his story. He emphasized that the indigenous people in Guatemala still face struggles, and that this country is more than just a tourist attraction. It has a rich culture and resilient people who have endured war, natural disasters, and centuries of discrimination. He hoped our visit fostered a deeper understanding and respect for the people of Guatemala. We woke up early on the final day of our hike with the plan of enjoying breakfast at the highest non-volcanic peak in Central America, La Torre. Don Heronimo's nephew greeted us in the morning and was to lead us all the way to Todos Santos. We summited La Torre with a sense of accomplishment and humility. The peak was peaceful, offering breathtaking views that we all took the time to savor. The radio tower at the top also held a special significance. It was here that Don Heronimo heard the 1996 peace accord being signed. Imagining Don Heronimo receiving such monumental news in this very spot was profoundly moving. We later packed up and made the long descent to Todos Santos.
That's what we've been working towards. Todos Santos! Todos Santos!
The stock individually. So that's one good way to tell if you're looking at a pine or not. And then the juniper here looks really noticeably different. It's really scaly. And that's a pretty distinctive feature that we saw also in the cypress trees that we passed on the first couple of days.
We didn't pass through any towns or villages throughout the entirety of our day, which made way for a deeper connection to the land itself.
Killed it! Congrats! Thanks! My legs are shaking. There was so much descending.
Todos Santos was the perfect place to end our 4-day trek. Famous for its strong cultural preservation despite colonization and genocide, Todos Santos maintains many of its indigenous customs. Most residents speak their original Mam language and proudly wear their traditional dress. While traditional attire was common in the communities we had hiked through, particularly among the women, it is especially notable in Todos Santos, where many men continue to wear their traditional dress. Men wear red and white striped trousers, blue jackets, colorful collars, and hats adorned with blue ribbons. As we strolled through the streets of Todos Santos, I had a huge smile plastered to my face. It was a joy to be immersed in the buzz of this remote town. I knew I might never return to Todos Santos, but I felt an overwhelming sense of contentment, knowing I was lucky enough to spend even a short amount of time there. Making it to Todos Santos felt like such an incredible milestone. We had spent 4 days trekking through some of Guatemala's most remote regions, taking in the history and learning from the locals. It was a hike like nothing I'd ever experienced before. We grew close and bonded as a group. We shared stories, forged new memories, and grew a strong appreciation for Guatemala alongside one another. Sitting on our porch in Todos Santos and watching our last sunset along the trek drop below the mountains, we felt a deep surge of humility. We had merely scratched the surface of what there is to know about Guatemala's history, but yet felt humbled to have been welcomed into the lives of those who were willing to share small pockets of their own experiences. Yeah, volcanoes are cool, but there's something about a trek like this that's far more impactful. It requires a sustainable mindset and a willingness to learn. It plants a seed of action and forces us to pay attention. We can no longer look away and pretend similar atrocities don't exist. As visitors, we have the ability to play a small role in a country's growth and prosperity. Go on a trip with a company like Quetzaltrekkers. Stay with local families. Learn from their experiences. Learn about their hardships, their joys, their hopes, their triumphs, and share that with the world. This is the Guatemalan Highlands.